It's the afternoon of September 13th, 2010. I'm Michael Aron of NJN News. We're at the Eagleton Institute of Politics at Rutgers University for the Rutgers program on the governor, the Thomas H. Kane Archive. This afternoon we're going to talk to Michael Horn. Mike was Commissioner of Banking in the first 2 years of the Kane administration and then became State Treasurer and actually served in the legislature with Tom Kane for one term. Mike, good to see you.
Hi, Michael. How are you?
I'm good, thanks.
Good.
Are you a native New Jerseyan?
Yes, I was born and raised in Nutley, New Jersey.
Grew up Nutley High School?
Yes.
And then where?
Then I went to Princeton for 4 years. Took a year off to go into the Army, and then went to Harvard Law School. Came back to New Jersey to be a lawyer.
Where at the beginning?
At the beginning, I was with a small firm in Newark. Then I moved to a suburban firm in Wayne, New Jersey, where I practiced for about 10 years. And early on, I got involved in politics. I had actually gotten involved in politics as far back as college. I belonged to the Princeton Republican Club and the Harvard Law School Republican Club. And as soon as after law school, as soon as you moved back to New Jersey, I joined a local Republican club.
In what county?
Passaic County. Yeah.
And you ran for office?
Yes. First time I ran for office, I was rejected by my local political organization, got 1 vote out of 18 to run for council. Since I failed there, an assembly seat came open, and I figured, well, why not try for something higher? And as fate would have it, first I won a primary, and then I won a toughly fought general election. And I actually ran with President Nixon in 1972.
So you served in the Assembly in 73 and 74?
Correct.
And you met Tom Kane there, or you had met him before that?
I met him there. In fact, I met him first day I was sworn in as a legislator, and I was wet behind the ears at the time. And
How old were you?
I was in my early 30s, and somebody, clerk of the assembly, said, well, who's going to swear you in? And the issue hadn't even occurred to me. And I said, gee, I don't know. And he said, well, what about your county chairman? And I said, well, I don't know about that. He says, well, why don't you have the speaker, Tom Kane, swear you in? So I said, I don't know the speaker. In those days, the parties themselves didn't become involved in special elections like the one I was elected in. And even though there were 40 Democrats, 39 Republicans, and 1 independent, therefore my election was a very important one to keep it at 40-39. The state party organizations were not involved financially or in any other way. So I hadn't met Tom Kane. I had read about him. And we were introduced about 10 minutes before he swore me in as an assemblyman, and which was really fateful because I came to admire him early on, like the first session. I said, gee, there's someone that I could really become involved with and team up with, and maybe we can change New Jersey and do some good things.
What impressed you?
His bearing, his intelligence, the fact that he was, this is trite, a nice guy. He was warm and friendly. And as I later found out, and to this day I will say, he doesn't have a prejudice bone in his body. Gender, religion, race, everyone is the same to Tom Kane. I think he's the only person I've ever met that I felt that way. And I recognized that early on, and it continued to demonstrate itself up through and including when I was state treasurer, when there were some issues that came up that reinforced that opinion that I had of him.
So you won a special election in an off year, is that?
Yes,
and,
right.
And Tom Kane was already the speaker.
Yes.
And then in '74, I guess Republicans were swept out of power in Trenton?
Most were. It was an unusual year for me. I did something that's rarely done. I enjoyed the 2 years I served, particularly with Tom Kean as Speaker, and we became close friends at that time. And there had been a redistricting that year, and as it turned out, Tom Kean and Assemblyman Phil Kaltenbacher, who were incumbents from Essex County, were thrown into my district, which was Passaic County. So there were 3 of us, where only 2 could get the party nomination. And since I was having some personal issues anyway, was whether I wanted to be a lifelong politician, and was trying to decide whether to run or not to run. And then I found 2 friends of mine, Tom Kean, whom I admired very much, as well as Phil Kaltenbacher, who at that time was Republican state chairman. And even though the Passaic County part of the district was much larger than the Essex County part of the district, and therefore I stood a fair chance of winning a primary, the issue of primary never surfaced in my mind, and I said, well, maybe this is the time to drop out, but I like Tom and Phil so much, I'll work with them while they're in there, and who knows what can happen in the future. And that's just the way it happened. Tom Kean and Phil Kaltenbacher survived the Watergate debacle for the Republican Party, and I think it was something like there were only 14 out of 80 assembly people were Republican. 66 were Democrats.
What was it about politics that made you feel that you might not want to stay with it?
Well, one of the major ones was, I guess there were a few. The major one was I found it hard to reconcile the duty to your party and your local leadership, county chairs and the like, and you're just wanting to do the right thing. It was bothering me, and I wondered whether I could continue to go on and do what I thought was right, vote the way I wanted to vote, while having pressure on me from the people who sent me there to go another way. A lovely man by the name of Frank Davenport. He was a sheriff of Passaic County at the time. And even though I liked him personally, he was the county chair, and felt that county chairs should have an influence on how the legislators vote, and I found that hard to accept. So while I was going through all that, the issue of 3 into 2 won't go came up, and I figured, well, I'll drop out. And at the time, I remember thinking to myself, I will come back again in some capacity, because I still wanted to do, I wanted to have an impact on my state and my community. And I said, well, Tom Kean's there, Phil Kaltenbacher's there. I had met Governor Cahill, who lost in a primary to run for re-election that year. I didn't know that at the time. I made my decision. And I said, I'll do something, and not knowing quite what.
Did you stay in touch with Tom Kean during the 70s?
Absolutely, and very closely. Having been the assemblyman from the Passaic County part of the district, I offered and he accepted. I said, I can make you a part of the Passaic County part of your district, just as you were in Essex County. And I can still remember there was one time I took him on a tour of Wayne, so that he can see the different areas. Wayne was the biggest community in the district. And we went to Packanack Lake and Pines Lake and other areas. And I would let him know whenever there was an event in Passaic County, like the annual dinner dance for the Wayne Republican Party and those kinds of things. And that's when we became even closer, because those kinds of dinners tend to become a little boring. And it was, again, I was a young, idealistic person, as was Tom Kean, and we would talk about the kinds of things we would focus on if we ever were in high positions in New Jersey government. And he would talk about wanting to do something for education and tax policy and environmental protection and the like, things he was working on in the legislature, but couldn't accomplish as a single legislator.
He had a couple of runs for higher office in the 70s. Were you involved in either of those?
Very much, in both of them. The first one was in 1977 when he ran for governor in a primary against Ray Bateman, Senator Bateman. And here's another one of those situations where my county, Passaic County, had committed to go for Ray Bateman. I still like Ray Bateman today, and I liked him then, but I thought Tom Kean would make a better governor. So I became head of Tom Kean's Passaic County primary campaign. That didn't endear me to the party regulars at Passaic County Republican Organization, and I can remember one instance to this day. I went to the annual dinner dance for the county organization, which was held, I guess, at some point in October, and I came up to the door and was ready to pay my dinner fee, and someone came out and said, "You're not welcome here." And I said, "Are you telling me that I can't come to the Passaic County Republican Organization dinner dance?" And he said, "That's right, you're not welcome here." So I went home. It was a Saturday night. I was going by myself. I came home. I called Tom Kean the next day, and he was. It was very interesting, his reaction, and he said, "Mike, I don't want to ruin your career. I want your support, and I want you to continue to support me, but if it's really becoming tough on you in your future, I'd understand if you didn't want to continue." And I said, "No, I will continue, and we'll win this fight." Well, we didn't win the fight. Ray Bateman won the primary, and then, as you know, lost to Brendan Byrne in the general election. I think it was Brendan Byrne. Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. And and then because he had run for governor, Tom Kean could not run for assembly. So then he was out of the assembly. We still remained friends socially and politically, and as you know, I guess he worked for NJN at the time. And we still maintained our friendship.
He didn't work for the station, but he was on the station once or twice a week.
Yes.
In a kind of freelance pundit role, along with Dick Leone. He and Dick Leone used to debate issues.
Right. So we maintained our friendship, and I can recall another personal thing that occurred. When you're in a primary, I mean, you devote all your time, effort, and energy, and whatnot. And so I remember speaking with my mother, and she knew what I had gone through. And so on election night, I spoke with her, and she said, "Mike, why are you knocking your head against a stone wall? Why don't you get out of politics?" And I still remember my answer to this day. I said, "I'll tell you what, Mom, if Tom Kean ever retires from politics, I'll leave politics. As long as he's in, I'm in." And not knowing at the time that Tom would run again for governor 4 years later against 7, I think it was, other candidates. And again, I was chairman of the Passaic County Kean campaign. It was in the days when campaigns were not run by professionals, but they were run by real people doing real things and stuffing envelopes and making phone calls and the like. And that year we won. And what a wonderful feeling it was. He won the primary, and then, as you recall, in the general election, with over 2 million votes cast, Tom Kean won by something like 1,781 votes, resulting in a recount that lasted almost up till Thanksgiving. We really didn't know who was going to be governor until Thanksgiving. And so I felt really good that my faith in him was rewarded. And I can remember when he became governor-elect, I visited him in the governor's Newark office. They gave him since he lived in Livingston, there was a governor's office at 1180 Raymond Boulevard. And I went to see him, and I said, we reminisced for about 10 or 15 minutes about the long, hard road to get where he got. And I said, you know, you and I have always talked about working together to do things for New Jersey, and I know what your goals are. I said, if there's a board or a commission that I could serve on, that would be great. I'd love to help you in some manner that way. I was still pretty naive at the time, and his response was, he said, Mike, would you serve in my cabinet? It just floored me. I had no idea. And so I said, well, if it's something that I thought I had some skill in, he didn't mention any particular position. I said, sure, I'll think about it. I went down to the public phone booth. We didn't have cell phones in those days at 1180 Raymond Boulevard, and I remember calling my wife, who was at that time a volunteer at the inaugural office, and I said, guess what? I said, I just met with Tom, and he wants me to be in the cabinet. And she said, what position? I said, I don't know. Let's talk about it tonight. And that's how it all happened. So he is, my friendship with him and my admiration for him to this day has been an important part of my life. And
Go ahead.
And when I look at what he has accomplished, not only as governor, a governor who was admired by both Democrats and Republicans, to this day you talk to Democrats and they say, what a fine governor he was. And then we went on to do the 9/11 commission, and he did such a great job there of uniting the Republicans and Democrats to do the best job they could for the country. I felt so proud. My only regret is that he never ran for United States Senate. I think he would have made a great U.S. Senator.
He did run for Congress in a primary against Millicent Fenwick, I believe in '76.
Yeah.
Were you involved in that?
Yes, I was. And what a sad thing. He ran against a wonderful woman and a wonderful candidate, Millicent Fenwick, who went on to be a great congresswoman, very popular. I don't have to tell you, a wonderful person. A close race with a recount. I was involved with the recount, so there was another loss. My involvements with Tom Kean were initially losses, and that was sad. He would have become a congressman, and who knows what would have happened thereafter.
In the '81 primary, one of his opponents was Pat Kramer, who was the mayor of Patterson in your county of Passaic. Did you run into any conflicts with local Republicans then?
The same conflicts. I was persona non grata. I had known Pat Kramer. I had actually worked in one of his first mayoralty campaign as a poll watcher for him. And but again, I had this instinct that Tom Kean would make a great governor, and so I had the usual problems. I was not welcomed, and I was frowned upon, and the like. But it didn't bother. At that point, it didn't bother me.
And you were practicing law during these years?
I was with a small law firm in Wayne.
So Tom Kean said he wants you to be in his cabinet. You went home to talk to your wife about which job, and then what happened?
Well, we pulled out Fitzgerald's Manual of New Jersey State Government so we could see what departments there were. And we started with agriculture and the A's, and that clearly wouldn't have been me. Now, when we got to B's, banking, and I said, well, my God, I served on the banking committee while I was in the state assembly, and I had been interested in banking ever since I was a boy, and used to go with my father when he did his, he was a merchant, and we used to go to the local bank together, and I was fascinated with banks. And then when I first had my first savings account at Nutley Savings and Loan, I was fascinated with the fact that you could get interest. And I worked in my dad's store, and he paid me, and I used to go over to the Nutley Savings and put the check in. He owned a liquor store on Franklin Avenue in Nutley. So I said, well, banking I could do, and we went on and on and on. Attorney General was one. Of course, I'm a lawyer. Of course, I could do Attorney General. There weren't too many others that I thought I had any great skill. So then it was about a week or two later that the governor-elect then did call me and ask me about banking. And it's a major move to leave a practice and back into government. So I actually didn't say yes right away. I said I need a day or two to think it over. And then I remember talking to my father-in-law, who said, Mike, if you don't take it, you'll always wonder what could have been or would have been. And that was the argument that, of course, how can I turn that down? What have we been working for all these years? So I called the bank and said yes. And I was one of the early appointees in the administration, and just went on from there.
Today, banking and insurance are the same department, but in those days they were separate departments, correct?
It was just banking.
Right.
Right.
So what did you do as banking commissioner?
Well, it was really interesting. Two aspects. One is that was when we had a recession. It was the Carter malaise years, and prime rate went up to something like 18 or 19%. So savings institutions had 30-year mortgages at 6%, and in order to bring money, they had to pay. There was usury that made it at 6%. You couldn't have a home mortgage higher than 6% in those days. In order to attract funds, they had to pay 8, 9, and 10%. Well, the numbers don't add up. So one by one, most, not all, savings institutions got into trouble. So I was kept busy merging them, closing them, and the like. And it was exciting. I mean, this was it was kind of like what we've gone through in the last few years, except these were mostly smaller and savings institutions. So I had a lot to do. Quite frankly, as I look back upon it now, I'm glad we didn't have insurance, so I could focus on banking. The interesting part of that service was that Tom Kane's family had been involved in banking in an ownership way before that. At that point, his family was mostly out of banking. However, because of that, Tom told me, he said, it's your department. You do what you think is right. I will never try to influence you in any way, shape, or form.
What bank had the Kanes been involved with?
Livingston National Bank was in some part owned by the Kane family. There were other Kanes who were, I think, on National State Bank in Elizabeth. And during the entire time I was banking commissioner, he only called me once on a banking issue, and it was really interesting. A large campaign contributor had asked to meet with him about a matter that was coming before the Department of Banking in an effort to get him to influence me, get the governor to influence me. And he called me to say, I've met with X, he told me who it was, as a courtesy. And he may say that to you when he talks to you. But you are to infer nothing from that. You just do what you think is right. So that was the only time we ever talked about a banking issue. Now, it was different when I became treasurer, but that was it on the banking side.
Did you talk about politics with him when you were banking?
Yes. Yes. I felt a special responsibility to be one of the many eyes and ears. We had a great cabinet with a lot of wonderful people in it, highly qualified people, honest people, loyal people, and so I think that was aside from his own qualities, one of the reasons he was so successful. He chose well. And there were a couple of stumbling blocks before he finally got the right person, like education, before he got Saul Cooperman. But by and large, he chose very good people, both from people, some of whom were involved politically in his campaigns, and others whom he had never met before, who had been recruited by others. Combination was great, but I felt a special responsibility to just, if I saw anything that might impact his future political career, I would call over and stop by and talk to him. And it happened on 2 or 3 occasions.
Remember anything in particular?
Well, there was again, I got wind of someone who was not in the administration, but still involved in the state party, and I can't mention his name. He's still around, who I thought was going to be getting into some trouble. And I just stopped over to say, be careful. This person could very well get in trouble, and I don't want it to spill over on you. And you're not involved with it in any way. But by and large, banking is an apolitical, and I did not have the same type of political discussions that I had had up to his election. I just kept my eyes on the banking arena. He appointed me, though, chairman of the Executive Commission on Ethical Standards.
While you were banking commissioner? While
I was banking commissioner, yeah. And so he continued to put his trust in me. I mean, that's one where there's real trust, because for obvious reasons. He had cautioned the administration. I'll never forget our first cabinet meeting, which oddly enough occurred in Washington, D.C. And the reason it was in Washington was the annual Chamber of Commerce train ride to Washington was around this time.
Always happens at the end of January.
Yes, and so we had not had a chance to get together as a cabinet. And I thought, well, this is a good chance. Most of them are going to be there. In those days, we did go to this. I know that some governors have restricted their cabinet from going. And he thought it was a good thing. And there were 2 things I remember came up at that meeting. One was he mentioned his emphasis on ethics, and he almost really didn't have to, because I thought he had, as I said, he had chosen well, but he felt it important to make that point. But then the other I found really interesting in the light of what happened was that he said, look, I and many of you in this room have worked very hard to come to Trenton, to have an opportunity to do some good for New Jersey. And all these things that we want to do, and they specifically mentioned, for example, education. He said, if the state doesn't move forward economically, we're not going to be able to do it. So my first charge to you is, in your departments, do what you can to make it a business-friendly state, so that the economy picks up, the revenues pick up, and we can do the kinds of things that we came down here to do. And we all then went out in our separate ways in each of our departments and did what we could to do that. Now, as we all know, New Jersey is not set apart from the other 49 states, and the economy of the nation as a whole impacts what we do. But I thought what we did helped push the peanut, and as you know, the economy did turn around, either because of us or in spite of us, one or the other. And then when I eventually became state treasurer, I really found out how the economy had turned around, and that gave Tom Kean the ability to carry out his policy positions, and he had some money to do it, whether it was paying teachers, increasing teachers' salaries, and helping the local boards of education to do that kind of thing, alternate route, infrastructure improvement within the trust fund and the like, and all that was made possible in a good economy.
Do you remember anything you did to push the peanut, to borrow your phrase?
Well, I encouraged banks to lend. We eventually repealed 6% usury because it was just counterproductive.
You mean you couldn't charge more than 6%, or it was
on a
considered
home, you couldn't
mortgage, or
legally,
it was considered?
It was illegal.
It was illegal
to charge more than 6% for a home mortgage.
And you did away with that.
We did away with that, and I encouraged the banks to grow and lend. And as we're finding out today in our national economy, if banks don't lend, and they're not lending today, the economy won't move. We really need a fluid banking system. So in that respect, I hoped I pushed the peanut, right.
As I recall, and as others have told us, Tom Kean had a kind of rocky first year, did he not?
He had a tough first year. I can remember it started with the furniture at Drumthwacket. It's amazing the things that become headline grabbers.
What was with the furniture?
Well, Debbie, his wife, apparently had made a comment somewhere that the furniture is massive, and it was just a casual comment, but the press picked it up, and then he and Debbie, because they had young children at the time, decided not to live in Drumthwacket, so there was a whole lot in the papers about the furniture and not living in Drumthwacket. But a lot of things went wrong. The original education commissioner, I think, never showed up. And then he hurt his back, and he spent a couple of weeks in the hospital. And I remember visiting him in the hospital, and yet, even though he still had a smile, I said, "Don't worry, things are going to get better," to try to cheer him up. And he had a legislature. Alan Karcher was the Speaker of the Assembly at the time, and they had some real battles, and those battles continued on through the first term. I think those battles ultimately helped Tom Kean have a huge victory when he ran for re-election. So there were a number of small things all put together, and the newspapers were not happy, public wasn't happy, and then somehow he turned it all around and things started to go his way. And
what do you think that? What turned it around? The economy. He changed chiefs of staff after a year.
Maybe I was too close to it to tell. As I think back upon it, the economy clearly helped. I think he. It could be his pro-environmental, pro-education, I think, started to take hold. And the more Alan Karcher and the legislature made it hard for him, I think he became a sympathetic figure. But it's hard, other than that, it's hard for me to put my finger on.
Those tourism commercials that started
that
around
was great.
'84?
Yes, I had forgotten that. New Jersey and you perfect together. Good point. It showed what I always liked about him, a very decent, nice guy. Funny accent, but decent, nice guy. And that came out. It showed him as a human being on the beach and in the mountains and wherever. New Jersey and you perfect together. That helped.
The treasurer at the beginning of the administration was Ken Biederman. Is that right?
Yes.
And then you became treasurer. How did that all take place?
Interestingly enough, Ken Biederman, our state treasurer, resigned to open a bank. He had gotten together with some investors to start a new bank.
In New Jersey?
Yeah, not far from Trenton. And I thought it was odd. Now, the good news is he went for a federal charter, so he didn't come to the Department of Banking for that. He went to Federal Home Loan Bank Board.
A bank that survives to this day or not?
No, the bank ultimately did not survive. So Ken left, and I was happy as banking commissioner because I loved the discipline of it. I loved the topic, and there was a lot going on. There was legislation going on in Washington. I testified in front of Congress. Congressman Minish asked me to testify in front of the banking committee. And I really enjoyed it. I became active in the Conference of State Bank Supervisors. And so as far as banking was going, things were going very well. But others in the administration said, well, Mike, why don't you put you're good with numbers, and you know Tom Kean, and you've been involved in government and the legislature and the like. So why don't you put your name in the hat for that? And so like I always do, I thought about it for a while, and I said, well, if you're only going to be in government I thought to myself, you're only going to be in government for a limited period of time. Do some even more significant things than you're doing now, and get an office in the State House next to Tom Kean's office. And once I thought about it that way, I said, yeah, sure, why not? The worst that can happen is the governor says, no, I've got somebody else. And so I did, and I don't remember whether I called him or stopped over or what. It's just too long ago. But I did put my name in. I did discuss it with Gary Stein, who was chief of policy and planning at the time, and he encouraged me to put my name in. And as fate would have it, he thought I was the person who should be state treasurer. And I'm very glad I did it. I didn't particularly enjoy being state treasurer, but I enjoyed being in the State House. I enjoyed having a greater role in policy, because everything revolves around Treasury, and the span of control in Treasury in New Jersey is enormous. The state treasurer in New Jersey is the most powerful state treasurer in the country. It covers taxation, information technology, and we were going through a problem there in state government there. We had outdated antique computers, and several other employee benefits, pensions, pension funds, all of that and more was in Treasury. So it was an enormously responsible position. Treasurer sits on 20 or so boards and commissions, significant ones: Sports and Exposition Authority, Economic Development Authority, and the like. And in fact, there were so many, the treasurer, him or herself, could not possibly keep up with and attend all of those meetings. So treasurer has to determine which ones are important enough to physically go to the meetings and follow on a day-to-day basis, and others in which you would utilize assistant treasurers and others to be your eyes and ears and attend for you and vote for you. And you would still monitor them. After each meeting, they would send you a memorandum. So You had the department to run. You had the boards and commissions where you had heavy responsibility. And so it was, from that standpoint, it was great. But quite frankly, and I say that to this day, it was too much. And I've even discussed this with the current state treasurer. I think it ought to be divided up into 2 or 3 positions, or maybe 4. But for me, it was a great thing, because chance to interface on a daily basis with the governor, be involved with revenues and tax policy, which are areas that I liked. Running of the departments was not a lot of fun. Monitoring employee benefits and the like. So there were parts of the job that were fun, there were parts that weren't. But it is governor's most powerful position in state government. State treasurer and I guess chief of staff, which doesn't run anything except the governor's office, I think they're the 2 second most powerful positions. And as I said, it gave me the opportunity to have a real significant role in what happens in New Jersey. And so, as I said, although parts of the job I didn't like, on the whole I was glad I took the position.
Were you involved in preparation of the state budget?
Yes. But we also had, and they still have today, Office of Management and Budget as well. Carrie Edwards, who was governor's counsel at the time, played a major role in the state budget because it was tied in with the legislature, where he had a big role as governor's counsel. But the state treasurer was involved in budgeting, estimating revenues, and the like.
What do you think the biggest issue you worked on as treasurer was?
There were several. One was setting up a new division to bring together all the wide and varied computer systems in state government. It was one of these typical situations where one department's computers couldn't link up with another department's and the like. So we actually created at that time it was called the Division of Information Technology. And setting up a new division is important, and it was at the time. The ones I remember most are, the one I remember most was, and this was, to this day I really think about it quite a bit, was Assemblyman Brown's bill to divest New Jersey of pension funds, of securities, of companies that did business with South Africa. And I remember the first time I heard about it, Assemblyman Brown had put his bill in the legislature. I hadn't noticed it when it first went in, although I also had a legislative staff that was supposed to keep me informed of bills like that. But the director of the Division of Investment asked to come to see me, and sure. And I sat down. He says, "You know what's going on? You know what's going on?" I said, "What's going on?" And he said, "There's this bill by Assemblyman Brown in the legislature." And so I got a copy of it. We went over it together. And I said, "Well, what are your thoughts on the bill?" And he said, "No, a treasurer is a fiduciary. You don't take these issues into account. That's for the political people. And so I'd like you to advise the governor not to sign it if it passes."
Because the pension funds would lose money?
Yes, that was his feeling. And he was probably right. You would have to sell securities of companies that you would not normally sell their securities solely for the purpose that they did business in South Africa. And there were a lot of, and I don't remember the names, but there were a lot of major companies, including a lot headquartered in New Jersey, who would do business in South Africa. So I mulled over it for a while, and then I decided, and I hadn't, I was leaning, I knew Tom Kean, And I know that this was one of those kinds of issues where I know that he would want to have a positive impact on race relations, and you know his history of the Newark riots and the like. And so I wanted to make sure that he knew about the consequences of it, but I was not yet prepared to say, don't sign it. So we had a talk in his office about it, and he convinced me that, not that my opinion counted, as he was going to either sign or not sign the bill. He convinced me that regardless of the economic consequences, it was the right thing to do. And it was a huge controversy at the time. And he eventually signed the bill. And ever to this day, I have been proud that he took what I thought was a courageous stand in order to do something that affected the world.
I think he told us that Bishop Tutu came up to him years later and said, you helped break apartheid. I believe that's what he told us in one of these interviews.
Yeah.
And in hindsight, it is one of the half dozen to dozen things that people talk about when they try to construct what the Kane legacy is. It didn't really have a whole lot to do with New Jersey, except that it was a very strong symbolic gesture on an international issue.
Right. And at the time, we look back today, you can't think of it, but at the time, it was a controversial but courageous act. He would do a lot of things like that. He really became a strong supporter of Holocaust education. The Holocaust Memorial in the park in Jersey City. There's a statue that was prepared to symbolize the Holocaust, and he supported a lot of those, and at times down to the very basic level. When I was state treasurer once, he called me and said, he said, Mike, I was driving in, he was being driven in by a state trooper, and what had happened was he saw this woman sitting on the curb in Trenton crying, and so he had the car stopped, and he got out and asked her what was the matter. And she said, well, I live in a tough neighborhood. I have a 7-year-old daughter that I need to walk to school and walk her home because I fear for her safety. And I work for taxation. I open envelopes. She had a seasonal job of opening state tax return envelopes. And they changed my hours so that I can't walk my daughter home. And I don't know what to do. And so he called me, he says, can you help this woman? Well, of course I could help her. But to me it just symbolized his heart, where yes, he was governor of the state of New Jersey, yes, a wealthy individual, wealthy with all kinds of power, but he wasn't too big to see a woman sitting on a curb crying and stopping and saying, what's wrong? So again, that was a Tom Kane that I came to admire 15 years earlier, and he's never surprised me.
You served for 2 years.
As banking commissioner, and then 2 years as treasurer, right?
Were you treasurer through the re-election campaign?
Yes.
Tell us about that election.
Banking commissioners are apolitical, and so I was not involved on a political basis at all. In fact, cabinet basically was not supposed to get involved. We were supposed to run our departments. I don't remember how it all happened, but a very nice and highly qualified individual by the name of Peter Shapiro, who was, I guess, the Essex County executive or something like that, former assemblyman, I believe, something like that. Very bright, nice individual, ran. But by that time, since the early stumbling first year of the administration, now 3 years later, Tom Kean had convinced everyone that he was a nice person, a competent governor. And as it turned out, as I mentioned earlier, he was admired by Democrats as well as Republicans. And through no fault of Peter Shapiro, first election was the smallest plurality in state of New Jersey history. And when he won his second term, it was the largest plurality in history. And I don't remember what the numbers were, but it was so it was a huge sweep in.
Peter Shapiro ran in a primary that year against Bob Del Tufo, Ken Gibson, John Russo, Steve Wiley.
Wow.
Would Russo have been a tougher Democratic opponent than Shapiro turned out to be?
Yes. Clearly. And Steve Wiley might have been as well. I mean, by the way, the entire group of good people. I think either Steve Wiley, John Russo, who was a real scrapper. I admired him very much. I think would have been a tougher. And again, now as I think back, again, I mentioned earlier about the fact that the legislature just automatically went against most of Tom Kean's initiatives. I think the public got a little angry at the negativism, and that's another factor in the big victory.
Alan Karcher, who you mentioned before, really became Tom Kean's chief antagonist in Trenton during the run-up to that election. What kind of guy was he?
I have mixed emotions. Very bright. I think, as you know, unfortunately, he's passed away. May he rest in peace. But he was the opposite end from Tom Kean on politics versus policy. And although towards the end of his life he wrote this great book about the number of municipalities and counties and how our local governments were set up, when he was Speaker of the Assembly, it was all politics. And I'll give you an example. When I was State Treasurer, one of the many roles of the State Treasurer, State Treasurer had to sign off on all state leases. And New Jersey's a big government, and leases were always constantly expiring, and you want to move into another building. And it was the reason the State Treasurer had to sign off on the leases was it was over the years, like a lot of things in New Jersey government, highly politicized, and some of it, I guess, crooked. And you had to know somebody to get a lease approved. And having the State Treasurer involved, as the legislature often did, to try to counter that kind of thing, was a good thing, because party was irrelevant as far as I was concerned, and for the preceding treasurers that I knew, it was for them as well. But at any rate, but they also provided that they had to be also signed not only by the State Treasurer, they had to be signed by the Speaker of the Assembly, who was Alan Karcher, and the President of the Senate. And it was one of these typical things where you needed a lease because a particular department needed some place to go, or you wanted to save some money, or it was particularly well located in an area that we targeted for economic growth, and all those kinds of issues that you take into account in leasing. And we couldn't get Alan Karcher to sign any, and so I went and had lunch with him. And I said, you know, why can't we just do this on a merits basis? And he turned me down. So again, I hate to speak ill of someone who's no longer around, but he was too much politics, and in my mind, not enough what's good public policy regardless of the political fallout.
Who were the 2 or 3 most important advisors to Tom Kean?
Well, Greg Stevens was clearly one. I liked his predecessor very much, but
Lou Thurston.
Lou Thurston, yeah, and Lou went on, as you know, to the Parkway, the Highway Authority. Clearly, Greg Stevens was. He was a strong chief of staff. I didn't have to deal with him that much because banking was not an area he or the governor had any interest in. Carrie Edwards, as governor's counsel, was clearly a great influence in there. The third, I would have to say, would be Gary Stein as head of policy and planning. I think Hazel Gluck had some good influence. Len Coleman. I wish Len Coleman had more influence. And you know what I'm referring to.
No, I don't.
Yeah. Len wanted to run for U.S. Senate when Nick Brady's seat, what had been Harrison Williams' seat. Tom Kean appointed Nick Brady to fill the term with the understanding that Nick Brady would not run for re-election. And Len Coleman wanted that, and he did not have, unfortunately, Tom Kean's support. It went to General, the Navy quarterbacks. No.
Pete Dawkins.
Pete Dawkins, you got it. And I think Len Coleman would have won that race. Pete Dawkins turned out to be a terrible candidate.
I think you're conflating 2 races, because Brady he didn't serve all the way through till '88, did he, Brady? I think he only served for about a year, and that Lautenberg and Fenwick ran to replace Brady.
Okay,
in 82.
You may be right. You may be right.
And then ahead to '88, Lautenberg had been in for 1 6-year term and was running for re-election,
right.
And there was a Republican primary to see who would run against him,
right.
And that's where Dawkins, I guess, edged out Coleman in Governor Kean's mind.
And well, that's when I wish it had gone the other way.
You think Len Coleman could have won that election?
Yes.
Yeah, Pete Dawkins had a tough time in that election.
He ended up having a lot of weaknesses and just was not a good candidate.
Why did you leave?
That's a good question. 2 reasons. One was, it turns out to be ironic, I did want to be Attorney General at some point, and it was not in the cards for me to be Attorney General at that time. And as I said, I enjoyed some parts of being State Treasurer. The administrative parts really got on me. The running of departments as opposed to making policy was getting on me. And I said, you know, if you don't enjoy driving in every day maybe you should go back to the private sector and help Tom Kane out there. So I discussed it with him, and he said, just now is not the time, and maybe it'll happen in the future.
Who was the Attorney General?
Well, Erwin Kimmelman, for one reason or another, left at the end of the first term. And Carrie Edwards, who was governor's counsel, and part of the job of governor's counsel was to oversee the attorney general. So Carrie knew everything involved in the department. So aside from Carrie's talents, which were many and still are, it wasn't in the cards for me. And Tom Kane was very open in that. And so I said, I've had a great 4 years. I think I've pushed the peanut with you. As I did 10 years earlier in the assembly, I think maybe it's time for me to go back to the private sector. He said, well, I will call upon you to continue to help where you can. So you never know whether you made the right decision or not. But right or wrong, I decided to go back to the private sector. I went into investment banking. And sure enough, 2.5, 3 years later, I got a call from Governor Kane, who said, now it's time. And do you want to be Attorney General? Because Carrie Edwards had decided to run for governor, and so was resigning at that time. And no question about it, the biggest mistake I made in public life was not accepting that offer to be Attorney General. And because I was busy. That's not a good reason. But I was actively involved in as an investment banker for banks. I still was involved with banking. And so, well, it's only a year and a half.
Were you making too much money?
I was making a lot of money. I don't think that was the reason, because I could have gone back again after. I was only going to be a year and a half anyway. So I made a mistake, and it wasn't that I made it willy-nilly. I sat down with my wife and we talked it over, and for some reason we came up with a no. And then a few months after that, I realized, what did you just do? And so I made a mistake. It would have been great to have served out a third cabinet position as Attorney General.
Would it have changed your subsequent career to have been Attorney General? Is that why you regret it? Because it would have...
No. It is a special position for lawyers to run a department of lawyers and make important decisions on legal positions that the state should take. For that reason alone, I should have done it. I eventually went back to practice law. I've now been at my law firm over 20 years. 1990, I went back to practice of law again. And I've enjoyed it since, but I missed that opportunity.
You mentioned the Newark riots, and you said that you weren't surprised that Tom Kane was interested in the divestiture bill because of how he had, or what he had done during the Newark riots, which were 16, 17 years prior. What had he done?
Late 60s. He, at that point, he was a young assemblyman, and I found this all out later on. I didn't know him at that time, the Newark riots. He went into Newark to try to, that was when Governor Hughes went in as well, of course, and I thought did a great job at the time, to try to understand what the issues were and the conflict between the cities and the suburbs. And it didn't gain him any votes in, oh, he did represent Irvington. Pardon me, he did. He represented Irvington. To me, it showed an interest in one of the major problems of the era, which was race relations. And it's the kind of thing we did talk about at those Wayne Republican Club dinner dances, race relations and the like.
What happened to New Jersey's image during the Kane years? Did it change at all?
Oh, that was one of the great victories or strong points about Tom Kane. New Jersey's image as a state that did the right thing, had honest government, ahead of other states in areas of environmental protection and the like. It really did a lot. The ads, of course, were one of the main things because they went all over. He became a symbol of the Jersey Shore, the mountains, a good state. We had, and I'm very proud of this, we had a corruption-free 8 years. A lot of times these things don't come out till later on. There was nothing to come out. New Jersey was looked upon as a with it state with good government.
Did you see him change or grow from the beginning to the end of the administration? Did he become a better speaker? Did he become a more confident leader? Or was he all of those things at the beginning?
Yeah, I don't think, well, he isn't the greatest speaker in the world. What he says is good, but he's not the greatest speaker in the world. And he'll be the first one to tell you that. He had speech impediments as a young man. But what he said was, he hasn't changed much to this day. To this day, I think he's the same Tom Kane. One of the problems we used to have with him during the several campaigns that I talked about was, he'd have a schedule. He's supposed to be West Orange at 8 and somewhere else at 9 and somewhere else at 10. And at 5 of 9, he'd be talking with a group of people, and you'd kind of sidle up to him and say, gee, I don't want to interrupt, but you have to be at West Orange at 9 and it's 5 of, and they're waiting for you there, the press is there, and that kind of thing. To him, it was more important to finish the conversation and get all the opinions out before he left. He would rather be late at the next meeting. I can still remember during the 81 primary, we were opening up a Kane headquarters in Clifton in Passaic County, and we had a real coup. We had one of the New York major channels on, one of the big three, to come in and do the opening, and that was huge. And I can still remember sitting there to this day, and the cameraman and the newscaster were saying, I'll give you another 5 minutes, and we're frantically calling to see if we get, but that was Tom Kane. I don't think he's changed to this day. He still takes his time. Whoever he's talking to, that's whom he's focusing on. 80% of politicians, when you talk to them, their eyes are wandering because they're wondering, who more important is there in this room that I should be talking with, if ever
all the time
come upon that. He never did that. I just heard about his being on one of the news programs yesterday, pushing the peanut on some national security issues. So he hasn't changed. He still has this interest in doing the right thing, and my faith in him has never wavered because he hasn't changed.
What do you think his legacy is?
I think, I guess two things. One is, I kind of wish I had volunteered to get involved with the 9/11 Commission. I think that was enormously helpful and will continue to be helpful on a national basis. And that's why it hurts me. But I know there were good and sufficient reasons, family reasons, he did not want to run for U.S. Senate. but taking on the 9/11 Commission and doing the job that he did on it, and he's an example that people continue to cite on how government can be effective, or how a government official can be effective and be bipartisan or nonpartisan to get the job done right. I think that, and the other legacy is you don't have to be a rapid fire political person of either party to be successful. Here's someone whom, as I said, somehow managed by doing the right thing, at times getting your own party angry with you, and getting support from the other party because it was the right thing to do and they admire you for having done that. So he really, I guess, he set an example of how people in public life should guide themselves.
Have there been governors before or since who impressed you as much?
No, I haven't seen one like him.
Let's leave it there.
Okay.